One of my favorite things about the Line 6 Helix, apart from the amazing amp modeling and all the great amp models we have in it, is the sheer number of amazing effects blocks that we have at our fingertips and at our disposal when using it. Now, oftentimes there are some sort of accepted ways to use effects. I say accepted, I'll put that in air quotes, because there really is no rules when it comes to this. But a lot of times we end up, and I'm just as guilty of it as others, for maybe using an effect in a very typical fashion, maybe just a little bit of chorus or a little bit of delay. But what if we start to think outside the box a little bit and maybe push the limits of some of these effects that we have so that we can maybe even get non-guitar-like textures in some of our music? And these things can be great when composing, when producing music, just to add different textures, much in the way maybe a keyboard would be used in the same manner, but without having to go into the keyboard world and just staying with our 6 strings. So today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite effects and using it in maybe a different way than a lot of folks. Now, by no means am I suggesting that I'm the first one to use this effect in this manner, but it is one of my favorite ways. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of how it can be used in a mix, as a more textural approach, and also as maybe turning our guitar into almost like a new instrument with some very different sounds as the main guitar part in a song. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. But first, I'm going to show you exactly what effect I'm talking about and how to set it up to get it to sound like this. So let's head over to HX Edit and take a look. So here we are over in HX Edit, and you'll notice that I have this little preset that I called Tremolo, and this is actually based off of my 2204 Ultimate preset, which I just released on the Line 6 Marketplace. If you like what you hear in this video, you can always go grab a copy of that. And this particular effect with these settings is a part of that preset. So you'll notice I have the Line 6 Original Tremolo effect. And we have these settings here where I have it set to a note sync of a 16th note, intensity of 10, which is kind of pushing the limits on it. And the really important part here is the wave shape set to square. The thing I like about this tremolo effect is we can go from saw up, saw down, triangle, sine, square, inverse sine, and random, which is kind of a cool thing we can do. Now you might ask what that does. Well, that's just changing the shape of what the modulation is doing. So if we set this maybe more in a typical fashion of what we would think of when we think of tremolo, maybe I'll set this to 8th notes, bring my intensity down, and have something like a sine wave, and we would get something like this. And that can be a beautiful texture. Sorry, I have a pretty distorted sound on it because I want to use it for the main example in this. But what I like to do is, like I said, push the limits on this. I'm going to set, as we saw before, the note sync to 16th note, intensity all the way to 10, and change this wave shape to a square wave, meaning it's basically going to shut the sound on and off, essentially. And we get this kind of a sound. You can see I have to do very little here to really have this do something kind of neat. I can hit one chord and just let the rhythmic pulse of what this tremolo does kind of create the music. Think maybe Green Day, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, that kind of a thing, which is a good example of how they would use it in that manner. But I also like this because we can come up with some pretty interesting little guitar lines that almost sound like they have a delay on them. Just letting that really intense square wave tremolo do the work. So this is an effect that I've used many times in my own music. And very, very recently, just late last week, I released this 2204 Ultimate preset, which is what you're actually listening to now, which contains this exact effect with these settings. When I was doing the demo video for this, I actually incorporated this, but in an extremely subtle way. And I want to take you over to Cubase and show you exactly how I did that and what I did to come up with the demo. So here we are over in Cubase, and here is the demo I used for my 2204 Ultimate preset that's available on the Line 6 Marketplace. And I basically created this riff as a demo when I created this tone, and here's what this riff sounded like that got this whole idea rolling. And I continued that with a bit of a heavier tone after. So I went to Tune Track Superior, Drummer, and Easy Bass and created a little backing track for that, doubled the guitar up. And basically the initial idea was this. So that was the starting point. I liked it. I liked the tone. I liked the little riff. I liked the way it was working with the rhythm section, but it was still missing just a little something. So I always try to explore different effects and build them into the presets so that others can also have these kind of cool little textural things, much like I said before, in the way that a keyboard would be used maybe as a pad to kind of just glue things together. So I thought that this little part that I just played you, which is fine on its own, could use maybe just a little something else. So what I actually added in there was this little guitar part using this tremolo effect I was just showing you. Hitting one simple little pair of notes and letting the tremolo do this rhythmic movement in time with the song. So you'll notice here the tempo of this is at 120 beats per minute. So I have it set for those 16th notes at 120 beats per minute. But I also wanted to pan those around and then add a second guitar playing a similar part, but a harmony to it. So those two parts together are this. What you'll notice though is I have them turned down considerably. These are these two channels here, panned hard left and right, whereas the other two rhythm guitars are panned a little less dramatically. So I have those just snuck in underneath. I don't want them to be the main part, but if we listen to those with the rhythm section, we hear how they work nicely. I try not to bring them in too often. I want them to just be subtle. And weaving in and around the other parts. So if we hear that all together with everything else in the mix, it sounded like this. At this point, you're almost maybe not even noticing them until you maybe take them away out of the mix. But that was one really fun, interesting way that I got to use this effect. Another example of how this can be used that is probably one of my favorite examples is from one of my favorite guitar players, and maybe somebody that a lot of you may not be familiar with, fellow Canadian guitar player from an incredible band up here called Big Wreck, and I am speaking of Ian Thornley. On the lead-off track on their debut album, they had a song called The Oath, and I remember the first time I heard it, and I just fell in love with it. Ian plays a lot of open tuned guitars. That's why I switched out guitars here. This is no exception. It's a bit of a wacky tuning, but he came up with this part that I think is just one of the coolest examples of how this kind of hard tremolo effect can really give us the ability to create some cool sounds. I hope I didn't butcher it too badly, but an extremely cool way, creative way to use this effect. All right, so there you guys have it. That is one of my favorite effects to use, and in that particular manner. And I think you can see that we could probably spark some really inspiring ideas or use it for some really interesting textures in our music. Doesn't even have to be the main thing, as I showed in my little audio demo, where it can just be a subtle thing underneath just to add some texture to a mix. Or it could be the main course, as I showed with Ian Thornley's example, or as I mentioned, Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day is another good example of how this was used. So I hope that that maybe sparks some inspiration for you guys to try that, and I hope you come up with some cool ideas from using it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. And also please subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I will be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.